Barrett Tagliarino here. Welcome back. And in our last video, we learned how to build major scale fingering patterns. We did pattern 2 of C and pattern 3 of C. So what I'd like to do today is find ways to practice those scales to make them more interesting and less scale-like, less like an exercise and more like something you can use. And you do need lots of exercises to help drill the scale shapes into your brain, because by themselves they're not really exciting things to practice. It's really easy to lose interest before they actually get under your fingers enough that you can apply them. So you need to know them because they are the right notes to play over a progression, but we need another way to practice. So first off, we're going to use a metronome. You got to play in time, and we're going to be concerned with timing and phrasing whenever we can. If there's a way to practice something that reinforces the normal time signatures and phrase lengths that you will encounter, then you should try to practice that way so that your reflexes are already trained when you get there. So what we're going to try to do is play in 4/4 time, and we're going to try to be aware of where's beat 1, you know. So here's my metronome. It's 60, and I'd like to practice the C major scale in pattern 2 here in 8th notes. There's 2 notes per click. Now, one measure of that, 1, 2, 3, 4, will fit the 8 notes of the scale, but I want to add one more note, and that's the 2nd degree, the D on the 2nd string, 3rd fret, so that we can go back down and wind up on the downbeat on the same note that we started from, the root. So in quarter notes, nice and slow first, it'll sound like this: 1, 2, 3, quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, and come back down. 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. So I know that's the downbeat because I counted 4/4 time. Now let's do the same thing in 8th notes, 2 notes per beat. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. So you really want to try to get right on that metronome and not rush, even at slow tempos like this. Okay, now take a second. In order to gain facility with this scale so we can really use it while we're soloing, we don't want to start on the root all the time. It won't make a lot of sense musically. You want to be able to start on any of the notes in the scale, and particularly the high ones coming down. So you can just practice picking any note. Let's say G on the 5th fret of string 4. And you want to have the pattern appear in your mind so that you can complete it without stopping to think. So that's one way to practice it, is just pick out a note and go up or down. And what I'd like to focus on is that top note that we used in the longer scale exercise. Okay, so here we had D. That's the 2nd degree of the scale, right? C to D. So we noticed if we started there on beat 1 of the 2nd measure, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, we came out on the root of the chord on the next downbeat. Now the same thing happens for chord tones 3rd, that's E, and G. If you start the next scale step up, an octave higher. So we want to be able to land on the root. We want to be able to land on the 3rd. we want to be able to land on the 5th. Those are the important chord tones, and maybe the 7th if we're playing something kind of jazzy. But let's try to get the 3rd and 5th. Now to get the root, we started on the 2nd, an octave up. So to get the 3rd, we're going to start on the 4th, an octave up. 3rd is E, right? So we're going to start on the 4th and play one measure of 4/4 time in order to land on that nice chord tone there. And like the other exercise, you could also start there as a up and down scale exercise. But I wouldn't want to practice more than like 2 bars of scale at a time. There's probably a tendency or an urge to just motor up and down indefinitely, just to get your fingers going. But that's not so good for training your musical reflexes, because, you know, while I was doing that, I had no idea which beat any of the notes was on, or where the beat was at all, really. I couldn't have told you where beat 1 was. So we're going to try to slow down and practice smaller pieces that allow us to keep track of that. So let's do E up to F and back, and with the click. 2 and 3 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you get the idea, right? So we landed on the chord tone. Now let's do it with the 5th degree. That's going to go all the way up from G to G and then to A, the 6th degree of the scale, an octave higher. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Do it again. From G, 3 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now let's do it without the ascending portion, just the descending lines. And this is going to be probably more commonly played, especially if you're doing a jazzy kind of solo. Descending lines are a little more musical. They don't sound like scales as much. That just sounds kind of like, oh, it's an exercise if you just start on the root, or... But it's a little less obvious when you're going down. So if you start on here, especially if you have a swing feel in your tune. So let's do some of those. Just starting from D, going down, and straight 8th notes again. 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Again, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Now from F, that's the 4th degree. 1, 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3. Now from A, 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Now that right there is enough to make actually a jazz line. You could just play it with a swing feel. And I would add one more thing, which is an additional 8th note on the upbeat of beat 1, and just drop down to the next closest chord tone, or any chord tone really. You could go from the 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2, from G down to E, or maybe G down to C, or or the 7th down there, or like that up to the root. Any other chord tone will work. So let's try that. I'm going to move the metronome up a little bit so that it's easier to play with that bouncing swing feel. 3, a 4, a 1, a 2, a 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, with the E at the end. Okay, and before we run out of time, let's try the last one that I played earlier, which is starting on C up here. And that's going to wind up giving us B, the 7th degree of a C major 7 chord at the end. Okay, so we got pattern 3, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 7, 5. Okay, if you need to stop the video and review pattern 3, go ahead. And we're going to do this. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. This also works, and this is training you to play any kind of music, but it's also really obviously good for beginning jazz lines. It's good for everything, but if you had a typical 2-5-1 progression in the key of C, that's D minor, G7, C major 7. If there were 2 beats on each chord, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, that would fit our line exactly, because the 2 chord has those upper notes that we talked about. The D, the F, and the A, those are all members of the 2 chord, and it just so happens that on beat 3, 1, 2, 3, you will get members of the 5 chord, the G7. So this progression fits those lines exactly if you play in 8th notes. So it could be D, there's a D there, G, C, or if you start on the F, you get your 3rd of D, that's right there. You get the 3rd of G7 and the 3rd of C. And finally with A, that's the top note of the D minor in 5th position here. I just have to change the fingering a little bit, so you might not be able to see what I'm doing, but you can hear that the line sounds the same, except now they're chords underneath. Okay, and then finally, if you start with C, that's also a member of the D minor 7 chord. Then you get F on the G7 chord, and finally B on the C major 7 chord at the end. Okay, so that's a good way to practice your scales. Descending lines starting on a major scale, 2nd degree, 4th degree, and 6th degree, and that will lead you down to a chord tone that resolves. And that's plenty of information for today. So I'll have some other exercises in our next video. Sorry about my hoarseness. We'll see you later.